Thank you for any comment.
It's okay.
Yes, we appreciate it.
Okay.
We were just at another house.
Anything to do with your work, no. And, but it's discouraging because they just are bulldozing. You know, it's like I was saying to Frank, we just found out that the neighbor at the farm, okay, you see the silos there.
Yes.
Okay, you can see that big field there.
Okay, hang on, we're gonna go back.
Okay, that farm there
You're gonna
just
hold this. You
agreed
just hold it right down.
to a major compressor station, which is our big, we won't talk yet, but it's our biggest nightmare.
What is the name?
Chesapeake, what's it, that's, would be Jim Barrett is the farm, Jim Barrett. There's John Barrett, there's all these different Barretts, there's Kevin Barrett, Pat Barrett, Jim
Well,
Barrett, John
we
Barrett.
can try it.
But Jim Barrett, that's the one, and it was supposed to be on that hill way over on Marshview, it's called the something, but they decided not to put it there, and he signed an agreement to have this major compressor station, and that's right direct the way the wind comes this way.
Gotcha. Well, maybe we can try to get a public hearing.
It's amazing, and you know what gets
That-
me?
that
His
will
family's
still
been
be-
here 100 years. They don't. It's like there's not even a thought as to what we'll do to the people around who have been here 100 years. You know, it's like I was saying, this farm here has been in the family 150 years. You know? His farm has been in his family 100 years. In fact, his family in Siblings, they have 1,200 acres there. Not an acre has left the family in 100 years. But it's almost indifference to what effect this might have on people. You know.
That was great. Did you get that?
What's that?
Boy, talking about indifference.
Is this
because-
on?
It wasn't, I just wasn't getting good sound at that last one.
I find that in my county, in Susquehanna County,
Check.
there's a silent majority, and I think most people are not happy, but they're just relying on it happening.
Check two.
So,
Check.
we are talking about indifference.
It's like an invasion almost. You
It
know,
is.
we've been
Occupied.
and you know, it's ridiculous. And DBDT, they're of no help. They're worse than that. They actually advise them.
Yes, and actually, Frank and I were at
Glad you
a
got that
trade,
little folder.
a trade meeting where Secretary Crancer was there at Villanova University, and Crancer actually said, you guys should teach us how to write the rules better. That's what Crancer said to the industry traders. And they were all saying to him, well, your permitting process is too fast, and you need to speed it up, and so. But he's industry. He's a lawyer, Crancer.
Oh, is he?
He's a lawyer.
I think he's the former DEP.
Hanger?
Yeah.
He has a blog now. I think he's employed by industry.
Nobody was. And Ridge, of course, is sold out.
And Corbett apparently comes out of voice management, which is perfect.
Oh, the governor?
Yes.
Who's part of it, really?
Pardon?
That's bad news.
Yeah, because of all the waste.
Can we just talk for a second? Put your word up.
Pick a topic. No sports teams.
That's perfect.
Yankees or Red Sox.
Okay, that's perfect sound. Why don't you just introduce yourself and tell us about your property.
Tell us what?
Tell us about your land here and how long you've been here and things like that.
Okay. I'm Dave Bohlander. The farm here we're on's been in my wife's family 150 years, 5 generations farming. And we were here, as I understand it, one of the first, if not the first area for drilling here in Bradford County, the Anton well right over the ridge there. Subsequent to that, there's been probably about a dozen pads built in close proximity here to the farm. In addition, there's been other activity where the gas company, in this case it's Chesapeake, has used the sites for things other than drilling. including recycling of the frack water, storing of the dirty frack water, equipment storage sites, etc. And so essentially the activity is endless. It does not end at the time the pads or the wells are drilled. We have 2 wells here on the farm, both have been contaminated, and essentially there's been no remediation at all done on either of them by the gas companies. It's a bad situation. We had water have to be trucked in for over 6 months for the cows in the barn. And both my sister-in-law at the Basin Hill as well as we here now drink solely spring water, and we've had major filtration systems put in the house for the rest of the water for our bathing purposes. And it's, I think the disappointing thing is on many fronts. One are people who you would assume and trust to oversee things for you, like our DEP, is terrible. And when I say terrible, both in enforcement and both in the degree they so quickly acquiesce to the overpowering of the gas companies. In one case behind me here, it was the Arnold site. The DEP actually advised Chesapeake how to get their permit into conformity because they were operating in non-compliance there. So where you assume people will keep these things in check, the environmental regulatory authorities, they don't. I think the other disappointing thing is, frankly, the neighborhood. Many here in the neighborhood who are all friends, the families have been here for over 100 years, and there seems to be almost a lack of concern as to what the environmental effect is going to be, both the air emissions and the water pollution that's going on. And essentially they, through participating and being yoked with these gas companies, is they are permanently harming the area here that our ancestors have farmed for generations. The trade-offs, the unfortunate thing is that the people that experience the costs here are different than the people that are getting the benefits. All the benefits to these landowners that have signed leases, they aren't incurring the costs of the air emissions and the water pollution that's happening. It's others that are doing that. And that I think the discouraging thing is the inequity of that. And the system allows for that inequity. And that's not America. I mean, we've been occupied here by a foreign entity coming in here and basically destroying land here that has been beautiful, productive land for generations and would have still have been productive for many generations to come. And there's no correcting this problem. The aquifer is getting contaminated. How do you correct that? And the fact is, there is no one even asking them to do that or preventing them to do that. And that's terrible. I mean, this is something that would happen elsewhere in the world. To think that here in America, where we look after people, we look after the minority people, not just the big power blocks, to think this is allowed, permitted, condoned, encouraged, as our government here in Pennsylvania is doing, is just amazing to me. And it's a sad day. I mean, my wife and I are in mourning over the change in values that is going on, that have gone on, and how our representatives don't represent us at all.
Can you tell us how the landmen came around? How did all this happen, like in 2008?
Well, as is typical, there are independent agents that come around and persuade you to sign. In our case, and we never signed a lease, and we will not sign a lease. In our case, they tried many different ways. They start out with the conventional landman, and when that failed, then they tried different mechanisms. They brought in a young woman whose grandfather owned a local livestock auction here and tried to piggyback off that relationship. She said that if we didn't sign, they would drill under us anyway, which is it possibly could be true, but it's illegal here in Pennsylvania to do that. When that failed, then they brought in someone who talked religious lingo to us, such as we're being bad stewards if we don't sign, and if we don't think we need the money, we could be charitable and give it in a philanthropic way to others. They tried many different techniques. They tried the hard man who would embarrass us and insult us and say we're harming our neighborhood. The thing I think that people should understand is this playbook has already been played out in other sections of the country. They're exercising it here as they have in other areas. And we're simply their latest laboratory rats that they're using it on. And people are very naive. These people, to even use local neighbors as landmen to try to persuade us. And we had one neighbor here that came and said he's concerned for us that we haven't signed a lease. And I asked him, why are you so concerned, Dean? And he said, well, I hate to have you lose out. Well, I found out subsequently he was offered a commission if he successfully persuaded us to sign a lease. And so you have neighbors being turned against neighbors, and you have neighbors manipulating neighbors. And it's besides the environmental effect, I think what's very troubling is just the relationships are being harmed now that have existed so well over the years here. And it's values, friendships, a lot of the intangible values which are much more important than the checks that they're getting in royalties. Those aren't even being considered, and those are being destroyed.
So what's happening around here as far as what are they doing? What do you got happening around
Well,
here?
right now, as there was a huge influx of gas workers here drilling back in 2008, 2009, 10. And we have, like I said, about a dozen well pads in close proximity here to the farm. Then what happened, and there was fracking of all this. Our road here was impassable for almost 6 months. There were neighbors, the only way they could reach their house was on a four-wheel vehicle. They ultimately reconstructed the road 3.5 feet higher in the air than it was before, basically put in an industrial arterial road through, and destroyed really the beauty that was the road that went through the farm here. Then there was been most recently a hiatus because the gas companies moved to Ohio where they thought they could make more on the wells there, and so a lot of the equipment was moved out and the pace slowed down here, and so that's somewhat in a holding pattern right now. Locally, our immediate neighbors, a lot of their royalty checks, which started out real well, dropped off dramatically for two reasons. One, Chesapeake, who has most of the leases around here, won some state suit which allowed them to retroactively charge expenses as deducts before they apply the pro rata amounts on the royalties to the pool. So we had neighbors here whose checks went from $6,000 a month to $500 a month based on that. And also they dampened down the gas flow. So what happened, a lot of people who got dependent upon these royalty amounts, they had a rude awakening because their income dramatically dropped almost overnight, causing more distress and lack of continuity in their lives. Right now, there's now plans that are coming back and going to drill more wells on the same pads. I think one of the things people don't understand is they mislead you to think that they come in, they drill the wells, they actually will say they will restore it back to the way it was. I don't know of one well, I haven't seen one pad in the whole county that's been restored back to the state it was before, or anywhere even closer. There's no attempt to it, and the reason is quite obvious. They intend to keep drilling more wells on these pads and refracking these wells, and they've announced just here the 3 wells very close to here. Neighbors got notices that they're going to add more wells to those pads, and this is going to start all over again, 24/7, with all the trucks coming in and all the noise and all the light. I think what's very interesting is there is no protection at all for the individuals for sound. Sound disturbance, lights at night, traffic. They have a complete license to do whatever they want, and it's extremely disruptive. There was a site up here that reconditioned, I guess you would say, dirty frack brine water, and the noise was endless, the truck traffic was endless, the dust, which you could see plumes of dust constantly going into the air, and there's no regulation on any of this. And meanwhile, we had our air tested here by a group who offered to do this, and we thought, well, this is a waste of time, and then we got the results back, and we were mortified to see there were 4 things above the safe level already in our air. And this is before the activity has really gotten to the point that it's going to get. This is just the early part of this whole cycle. So, our hope is becoming limited as to where our hope is, and it's not in man. Man has failed us here, as I described before.
How about health effects?
Well, personally, it's affected us. My wife's liver enzymes have been elevated, and she's been to see specialists now. I think it's 6 times on that. The cause has not been identified. She actually was directed at Johns Hopkins to their disease toxic control department because they did not, the identification was it was some type of pollution, toxic pollution that was happening. We've had our well tested numerous times. Part of the problem is you can't afford to test for the hundreds of things that they don't even tell you they're doing. My sister-in-law down here had a black ooze coming out of her ground. The DEP refused to test it. She had it independently tested, and it was volume coming out of her ground. The well across the way was apparently one of those early wells that had improper casing. She had so much methane in her water well, it was disconnected for 6 months because they thought the house would blow up. And again, there's been no accountability whatsoever to this. It's like there's one can do these things and have no cost at all to doing them. And part of the problem is you test for one thing, and it might be good only for that day because it's erratic. We have high manganese in our water. And then you test it sometime later and it might be fine, and then a little bit later you've got something else. And so the unpredictable and always at risk environment here is quite unsettling. And again, it's kind of like what was it, Oliver Wendell Holmes, who said, "Your right to punch ends at the tip of my nose." Well, it's kind of like this. We didn't sign a lease, so why do we have to bear the cost of being up at night with lights shining in our house and endless noise traffic and air pollutants that are showing up? They're in an unhealthy range, and our water being contaminated. I thought that right should end at the property line of the person that signed the lease and gets all this money. And again, there's this kind of unsaid thing now in our state that we have the right to take whatever we want from anybody, and the consequences are we're indifferent to it. Well, that's not the America I know. That's not the America where people have rights that are inalienable and cannot be just trampled upon by peoples of power and great money, and who donate $2 million to the governor to run. And it's, all our politicians here in the county, most all of them get huge donations from the gas companies. And it's shameful. The gas companies, they'll give to the ambulance, the fire, and everything, but will they restore our water here, contaminated water on the farm? They haven't even offered it. And there's a complete indifference to it. That's not right. And what we need someone here who represents the people and not just these businesses that are destroying our state. I tip my hat to New York. New York wisely has seen how Pennsylvania has trashed their own state, and they're holding back. I would love to meet with Andrew Cuomo and encourage him to keep that moratorium going, because as time goes on, they're going to find more and more of the facts of all this stuff that they're doing with the fracking and the harm that's happening to water and air emissions and things like that. I wish I was in New York State, and it's really shameful. I am embarrassed with our state of Pennsylvania.
So it's another question dealing with water. There's been a drought around the whole Northeast, and we're noticing all these. They're sucking like 1 million gallons, 34 different places out of the Susquehanna. What do you think about that?
Well,
just the whole water issue in general.
Well, water is our lifeblood. Okay. Here in the farm, how do you have a farm if you don't have good water? How do you have animals if you don't have good water? Here in Bradford County, Bradford County has only 60,000 people. It's one of the more beautiful states, I would say, as far as the terrain and everything. Why the gas company can get the priority on the water on the Susquehanna compared to the people that use the Susquehanna for recreation and canoeing and fishing, etc. That's another example where, again, the state isn't helping the people, they're helping these companies. My concern here is there is no clear-cut evidence as to what this is doing to our aquifer, both removing that amount of water and also what they are doing in this fracking is ludicrous. To think that you can be putting 5 million gallons of water laced with chemicals, well after well after well, and have no effect. I mean, it's laughable. I mean, we have here in this house alone now, we have things. Our well was wonderful for decades here. People used to remark how good our water is. Now we have some gray substance coming in right as it comes in. We have 2 house filters, one both before our filtration system and one after, and the one before the filtration system has things coming in. We never had anything like that. The filtration system in this house alone was $7,000 that we had to put in. And again, the technology isn't such that you have any assurance it's filtering out what they're putting in. In fact, the technology isn't even assured that they can test for what and identify the things that are in they're putting in this frack water in the aquifer. I mean, if there's a faulty casing that results in so much methane that comes up into your well and house that they worry it can explode, is it quite logical that the same chemicals that they put in that frack water would migrate as the methane did over time? And again, I think one of the just shocking things is we have here in the neighborhood here is, by the way, this is interesting, of all the wells in the state, and I think it's around 1,200, 1,500 wells now, in the top 15 for the most violations, 3 of those wells are right here in this neighborhood. 3 of the top 15 for the most violations are right here in this neighborhood. The violations that happened were severe. None of the neighborhood was notified by any of the environmental people of these violations. With one friend who's abuts one of these sites, he has severe gastrointestinal problems right now. Is it from that? Again, the state is indifferent. They haven't even notified him when the spill happened to be cautious maybe to drink his spring water. So it's really a sham, and people should wake up to the fact that their risk is a lot greater than that they are aware of, and that the people that they think would protect them in this risk are completely, they're not sleeping at the wheel, they've been whored to the gas companies. And it's shameful.
So, what do you got to say? Like, I live in New York, and they're bringing a pipeline up. They're setting up the infrastructure right now, and Governor Cuomo has basically he's willing to sacrifice the 5 lower counties above Pennsylvania. What do you got to say to the people? What's coming for New York if we don't stop this right now?
Well, okay, I have some empathy for New York, having been born in New York State. I think what I would say to them, these southern counties, southern tier counties, is you're fooling yourself. The money is quite tantalizing. Money, really, this is a prime example of money being the root of all evil. You think that big check that you get and that royalties that they promise you, the trade-offs that you are making because of that, and the trade-offs you're making on your people around you, your neighbors, is not anywhere near that type of money that they're giving you, as much as that money may seem. And you are selling your soul. You may be gaining the whole world in your checkbook, but you're selling your soul on this. There is no way you're going to be able to mitigate the harm that this does to your area. And they're fooling you. The gas companies are fooling you. They will be long gone before any accountability. And the fact is, they won't be able to restore your water. The water is the most important thing. Well, air emission as well. But water, you cannot replace an aquifer. And why that is being used as some roulette wheel where everybody can be gambled, so they can, Audrey McKendry or whatever can live his jet life style at the expense of all this. It's ridiculous. It's shameful. It's disgusting. I think the other thing that here's a message to Cuomo, to Governor Cuomo. I think it's shameful that the only water they're concerned about is New York City and Syracuse and metropolitan areas. So you trash the rural country aquifers. What about their drinking water? What about the water for the livestock here? I think that's quite, I don't know, urban-centric? Is that a word even? To think that we can be the, sacrificial lamb to provide all the gas for New York City. I think that's pretty, that's not America. That's quite inequitable. That's quite biased. And to think that's a plausible argument to use, that's quite surprising. Everybody's aquifer is important. And this is all linked. There's no wall that stops one aquifer from the mile down the road. And to trade off energy and one type of energy for water, which is irreplaceable, whereas energy, there's alternatives, is nuts. It's insane.
Becca, you got anything? You want to make any closing statements, or that was fantastic.
I would just ask, what do you think we can do in Pennsylvania? How do you keep hope alive?
I think what we can do in Pennsylvania is have a revolt by the people who haven't been, whose wallets haven't been